Hello, Petal. Thank you for coming back and joining me for Chapter 19 of You Don't Have to Be Evil to Work Here, but It Helps. J.W. Wells & Co., Book 4. This is the last chapter in this book, but certainly not the last that I'll be reading in this series. A question for the day in the comments section is, do you enjoy the flipping of pages when you hear an audiobook, or do you prefer not to hear it? You see, I have all of Tom Holt's books, and this is actually what spurred this question. But I also buy the ebook to record this podcast. So really, I was just curious. Do you enjoy the page flipping, or do you enjoy the quiet? So as ever, please feel free to leave a comment, have a little chat, let me know how you are. It's always, always, always good hearing from you. And I'm going to do my usual, which is please, please, please ding ding that little notifications bell. Like the video if you enjoy it, and if you really enjoy it, please subscribe or share if you like to. That'd be awesome. Enough waffle from me. Let's get on with Chapter 19. Slightly breathless after sprinting up 2 flights of stairs, Connie knocked on the door and opened it, dragging Colin in behind her. Then she stopped. "Oh," she said. "Sorry, I was looking for—" The thin-faced girl lifted her head and smiled. "I know," she said. "You were looking for me." Connie wilted slightly, the way you do when you've been proved right, but wished you hadn't been. "You know what?" she said. "I had this funny feeling it was you, but I assumed it was just me being dozy. Hooray for intuition! So, you're the new boss, then?" "Yes." "You're the one who had me sacked?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you've been making a nuisance of yourself." "Oh!" Connie nodded happily. "In that case, I forgive you. If it had been because you thought I wasn't any good at my job, I'd have, "You might as well sit down," the thin-faced girl said. Connie frowned, upset at being interrupted before she could work up a good head of righteous indignation. Then did as she was told. The thin-faced girl hesitated. "Obviously, you've been giving the current situation a lot of thought, and I would appreciate any insights you may have to offer." "Cool!" Connie grinned. "You know, that almost makes up for it. Oh, by the way," she added, "who's your friend?" The thin-faced girl smiled. "He nice." "He?" Connie remembered about Colin and turned around to find him trying vainly to walk backwards to the corner of the room with his eyes shut. "Hey, you," she said. "Introductions, please." But Colin only shook his head. Apparently he was having trouble with his language skills, as well as with his motor functions. Instead, the odd-looking specimen sitting next to the thin girl stood up and bowed very slightly.
"My name is Oscar,"
it said. "Charmed. I'm Connie Schwartz-Albridge. Sorry if I'm butting in on a private meeting."
"Not at all,"
the thing called Oscar said.
"As it happens, we have just concluded our business with Miss Clay, and I'm needed back at Mortlake."
It did something with its face that was presumably meant to be a smile.
"Mr. Hollinghead,"
it said, and Colin shuddered from head to foot.
"I must confess, I am surprised to see you here, but in fact, your presence is rather timely. I fancy that you're about to hear some good news. Farewell, forever."
Then Oscar dipped its head, waggled its fingers in a teeny-tiny wave, and vanished, leaving behind a small yellow cloud that quickly dissipated into a bad memory and a worse smell. "Indeed," the thin-faced girl said, as though nothing noteworthy had happened. "Good news, Mr. Hollingshead. You're off the hook."
Am I?"
Colin muttered.
"Oh, great. What hook?"
"The contract, of course," the thin-faced girl said. "It no longer applies to you, or to your father, for that matter. As far as Oscar and his associates are concerned, you're free." It took a moment for that to sink in, and once it had, Colin was surprised by how little he felt. Relief, yes, but not the kind and strength he'd have anticipated. It was more, you don't have to go to tea with your Aunt Olive, than saved from everlasting torment. An irritation sidestepped. Nothing more. Great, he said. Why? Because someone else has agreed to take your place, the thin-faced girl said. Don't ask for further information. He might spoil it for you. Colin shook his head. Who was it? Me. And that, as Connie was the first to recognise, was actually the most remarkable thing, that Colin, dosed the eyeballs with JWW filter, had been in the same room as Cassie for several minutes and had barely registered that she was there, until she said that one word. You? Cassie nodded. Well, she said, it's only fair. I got you into this mess. No, you didn't, Colin snapped. It was my stupid dad, so it's not fair. You were just doing your job. It's still my fault, Cassie said, not looking at him. And even if it isn't, you shouldn't have to suffer. You aren't anything to do with us, the trade. You're a civilian. It took Colin a moment to realise that she meant that as an insult. Both of you, the thin-faced girl, could talk quite loudly when she wanted to. That's enough. The simple fact is, Ms. Clay has made a binding contract and neither of you can do anything about it. Accordingly, Mr. Hollinghead... I see. Connie had been sitting perfectly still for an uncharacteristically long time. Yes, I get it. You need Colin off the hook so that he can reincarnate. Quite, the thin-faced girl said. Also, he is morally blameless, and my organisation's first priority is to cover up its own messes, yes. Connie's nostrils were flaring. The last thing I'd expect from you right now is a holier-than-thou attitude, even if you are. Oh, the thin-faced girl scowled. More intuition? Yes, Connie said firmly. Oh, it wasn't difficult. You buy up this firm, go to all this trouble, so that you can fix the true love screw-up. Who else could you possibly be? I'm not quite sure, she went on, if you're the with a flaming sword kind, or the perched on top of a Christmas tree variety. But I don't suppose it matters, and it still doesn't give you the right to sack people for trying to help their friends. No, I suppose it doesn't, the thin-faced girl shrugged. Very well. Now that there's not much point in trying to keep this wretched business confidential, I suppose you may as well have your job back. No, thank you. As you wish. You were a satisfactory employee, but hardly irreplaceable, and besides, the affairs of this firm really don't concern me much anymore. As you say, Mr. Hollingshead here is now cleared for reincarnation. The discrepancy can be dealt with, that's all that matters. For my part, I've become heartily sick of this environment, and I shall be delighted to go home again. Fine, Connie said. Push off. Pause. The thin-faced girl was clearly waiting for something to happen. Equally clearly, it wasn't. First, she registered patience, then frustration, then irritation, finally panic. This isn't right, she said, in a distinctly unhappy voice. I ought to be on my way home by now. I shouldn't still be in here, or in this outfit, in this corporeal state, the thin-faced girl amended. I should have resolved myself back to a higher plane of existence. This time, Connie laughed, not kindly, but with genuine warmth. Still here, though, aren't you? Which means, she added crisply, that the balls-up hasn't been sorted out after all. Something's still wrong, and you still don't know what it is. The thin-faced girl gave her a scowl that you could have impaled a kebabs on. So it would seem. You don't know, Connie repeated, but I'll bet your wings and your ducky little golden harp that I do. Intuition, she added ferociously. Something you sneer at but don't have. Were those horrible bloody baseball caps your idea, by the way? If so... Just a minute. Cassie had come back to life again. Connie, do you really think you know what the problem is? Yes, but I don't see why I should tell her anything. She's the one who made us do all those stupid bloody assessments. And she changed the coffee from Gold Blend to Tesco's own brand. I can forgive most things, but sheer petty mean-mindedness... Connie, Cassie snapped. What's the problem? Connie wavered for a moment. Oh, all right then, she said. Look, it's really very simple. Margaret Thatcher here... Thin-faced girl winced sharply but said nothing. Seems to have been basing her calculations on the assumption that you and young Colin are both reincarnations of the original star-crossed lovers. Right? Yes, the thin-faced girl said. Actually, it's more than an assumption. We have delicate, precision-calibrated equipment that allows us to trace the passage of a soul through its various avatars, even in this case, where the incarnations have been running backwards instead of forwards. Our instruments clearly show that Miss Clay here is the 15th incarnation of the female star-crossed lover. As for Mr. Hollinghead, it's perfectly obvious that he's also an avatar. Quite apart from our instruments' readings, the fact that the pending forfeiture of his soul caused such an upheaval... Such your instruments? Connie interrupted. All right. Maybe Cassie's an incarnation, I'll give you that. But not young Colin. He's not a 15th generation retread. He's the original. Stunned silence. That's not possible, the thin-faced girl said eventually. We know who the originals were. Furthermore, Miss Clay here has actually met them. They came through the connecting door from the land of the dead to consult her. Cassie looked up sharply. How do you know about that? Simple. I opened the door and let them through. Did you know? Connie nodded thoughtfully. Thanks. That ties up another loose end. Really, you're being very helpful all of a sudden. But forget about that for a second. I was explaining it all to you. Or had you forgotten? Carry on, the thin-faced girl replied. Like I told you, Connie said, it's pretty straightforward once you stop and think about it. You see, you've been coming at it from the wrong direction. Typical, I might add, but I won't, because otherwise we'll be here all night. The point about this mess, as I see it, is not just that we've got a case of true love, but a case of true love that got screwed up. So, what we need to do is find the cause of the screw-up. Now, what makes true love so important is that it's true love. It's boy meets girl, they fall in love, they live happily ever after. Absolutely basic. No frills, no complications. Once their eyes have met across a crowded room, that's it. No force on earth can ever separate them as long as they live. Almost. Because, of course, there is one force on earth that can bugger it all up, and that's J.W. Wells & Co.'s patent oxyhydrogen love filter. Guaranteed. The only way a true lover can be prized off his one true love and made to fancy someone else is 5 milliliters of the good old stuff, taken internally. That simplifies things, doesn't it? Of course, I haven't got access to all your search results and instrument data, so I can't be sure that out of all those poor sods who've been dragged into this mess by way of retrospective reincarnation, or whatever, young Hollinshead's the only male partner who's ever had a dose of the big bad medicine. However, I'll bet you the knickers I'm wearing that it's true. Of course, Cassie's drunk the stuff as well, so it's possible that she was an original rather than a remake, but I don't think that's the case. You see, while all this garbage has been going on around him, Colin here reckons he's found his one true love. Stout girl, works on the front desk here, name of Famine Williams, and no disrespect, Cassie dear, the same can't be said of our Cassie. In fact, she wouldn't know love if it bit her on the nose. Now, once you've got that far, everything else just sort of drops nicely into place. Colin and his fam are true lovers, but something goes wrong with disastrous results. Fine, you and your bunch of idiots swing into action to sort out the problem, but the problem won't sort out because the reincarnate and fix it next time round option's not available to you, thanks to Daddy Hollingshead ill-time pact with the devil. Result, incarnations back up into the past. One of them is Cassie here. You, with all your technological wizardry, assume that Kaz and Colin are avatars, and you decide to force them to fall in love by spiking their tea with JWW filter. Bit high-handed, maybe, but at least I can see where you are coming from. Like most people who do unbelievable amounts of harm and damage to others, you were only doing what you thought was for the best. Okay, let's just stop and think about this. Something bugs up Colin and Fam's true love. We've already seen that. 1, the chronology of this is all to cock, thanks to the contract with your mate Oscar. 2, that only JWW filter could have caused the screw-up in the first place. Got it? Oh, come on, it's obvious. It's obvious what messed up Colin and Fam. It was you, dosing Colin with the filter, making him fall for Cassie. See what you did? By trying to solve the problem, you bloody well caused it in the first bloody place. The 2 seconds after Connie stopped speaking were a very long time. Galaxies could have spawned in that time and drifted from one side of the universe to the other. Oh, said the thin-faced girl. I think that puts it rather neatly, Connie said. Oh. She breathed out through her nose like an irritable horse. For crying out loud, she snapped. I thought the whole point about you people is that you're supposed to be infallible and omniscient and all that stuff. You know, to err is human, which you most certainly aren't. But instead, you got it wrong. More than that, it's because you got it wrong that there was something to get wrong in the first bloody place. No disrespect, but if you lot were running the brewery Christmas party, someone would end up having to do a last-minute emergency dash to the off-licence. The thin-faced girl looked at her. Have you finished? She said. For now. Good. Very well. The thin-faced girl held out a bit of paper. I assume you're competent at simple arithmetic. Perhaps you'd be kind enough to add up the column of figures and divide the result by 26. What? If you'd be so kind. Connie shrugged. Whatever, she said. A minute or so later she said, 9. Then something curious happened. The thin-faced girl smiled. Not a humourless grin or a sardonic smirk, but a great big beaming smile, practically angelic. Ah, she said. So that's all right. Not only did the penny drop, it landed with enough force to bury itself into the rim in the concrete. So, maths is working again, Connie said, which means the cock-up is all sorted out. I wouldn't go so far as to say that, the thin-faced girl replied. Before that can happen, Mr. Hollinghead needs to go down to the front office. Me? Colin sat up sharply. What have I got to do with, right, he added. But that won't do any good, he said sadly. She dumped me, remember? I think it may be possible to induce her to change her mind, the thin-faced girl said, provided you can do a simple thing, like apologising without making a mess of it. Given the trouble we've all been to in order to secure you a happy ending, it'd be appreciated if you could see your way to making a special effort. Colin was about to object that all that trouble wouldn't have been necessary if a bunch of bastards hadn't decided to play funny games with his life, but he decided not to. More important things to do. He stood up. Right, he said. Well, goodbye. Goodbye. The thin-faced girl dipped her head in a very tiny gesture of acknowledgement. Send us a postcard from Vanuatu. Colin thought for a moment. No, he said, and left the room. Now then, the thin-faced girl had slipped back into brisk mode. Before we wrap up this meeting, are there any questions? Do angels have teeth? Connie wondered. And if so, what weapon and how much force would be needed to smash them in? Yes, actually, she said. Why did you open the door in Benny's office? You nearly scared the poor lamb to death. It was essential, the thin-faced girl replied. So the dead couple could come and see me, Cassie put in. The thin-faced girl shook her head. That was merely a diversion, she said, or at least an incidental benefit. The real reason was so that Mr. Hollinghead could go through the connecting door into the Bank of the Dead and then come back again. Really? Connie said. Why? This time the thin-faced girl's smile was more of a sneer.
Because he had drunk the filter and fallen in love with Miss Clay. But that had failed to solve the problem. Therefore, it was necessary to undo the filter's effects. The filter, you will recall, remains effective for as long as the person who drinks it lives.
But Connie frowned. Oh, right. And going to the bank counts as dying.
Correct. Technically speaking, of course, the bank officials recognised that they had no jurisdiction over Mr. Hollinghead and sent him back.
Just visiting, Connie said, remembering something. The get out of death free card. No, it's all right. Doesn't matter. Go on.
Thank you. I should point out, the thin-faced girl went on, that this was something of a miscalculation on our part. Simply visiting the bank does not in fact count as death, a fact subsequently pointed out to me in a memo from the bank's acting assistant manager. Fortunately, he had the insight and the intelligence to recognise a star-crossed lover when he saw one, and sent him back immediately. Otherwise, she paused, and if it had been possible for angels to blush, she would have. It also follows, she went on, that it shouldn't have been Mr. Hollingshead's visit to the bank that released him from the effects of the filter, and I can only conclude that you were correct and it was his pre-existing true love for Mrs. Williams that achieved that result. Nonetheless, thanks to Mr. Dow, an awkward complication was avoided, she said, for which we can all be heartily grateful.
She wasn't expecting the awkward silence that followed. It was Connie, needless to say, who broke it. Some of us, at any rate, she said.
Excuse me?
Oh, for pity's sake, Connie exploded. You think you've been ever so smart and clever, even though you misread the whole stupid business and nearly got us all killed, or unborn, or whatever. But maybe you're overlooking the fact the poor Cassie here has been left up to her neck in it, unless, of course, you've got the power to override a duly executed binding contract. Before the thin-faced girl could reply, Cassie sighed and said, It's all right. I don't mind. Connie scowled at her. Cassie, dear, don't be so bloody stupid. Haven't you been listening? These people... It's all right, Cassie repeated firmly. It doesn't matter, because I don't believe in all that bullshit. Hell, I mean, and afterlives and stuff. The thin-faced girl pursed her lips.
With respect.
Respect, Cassie snubbed. That's a laugh, coming from you. No, I don't believe in you either. Oh, I'm prepared to accept that you're some kind of supernatural bureaucrat, because I know people like that exist. I spend half my life leaving messages on their voicemail. But that's all you are. I don't believe in you because that would mean I'd have to believe you're somehow better than me. And quite obviously, you're not. You're just bigger and stronger. So I don't believe in hell either. I think it's just ordinary death, or maybe not even that. In fact, do you know what I think hell is, miss, whatever your stupid name is? I think it's being pushed around by the likes of you, in which case I've put up with it this long, I can probably cope with it forever and ever. Just knowing that whatever happens, I was in the right and you people were in the wrong will make it bearable. No, shut up, Connie, she added sharply. I'm just about to get my own back, so don't interrupt. I'm going to teach this stupid cow a lesson she won't ever forget. The thin-faced girl's fears had never been thinner. You could have shared with it.
Really?
She said.
How'd you propose doing that?
Cassie's turned a smile. Definitely angelic. Easy, she said. I'm going to forgive you. The brief silence that followed was broken by a loud, vulgar noise from Connie. Part whoop, part snort of laughter, part rebel yell. Cassie, that's brilliant! You go, girl. Oh, she's going to have so much trouble explaining that one away to her boss when she gets home. She grinned savagely, like a wolf. I take it you do have assessments and performance reviews and stuff where you come from?
Of course, the thin-faced girl said.
And baseball caps. Oh, tell me you have baseball caps.
Certainly. We find them a very potent symbol of the team ethic.
That settles it, Connie said cheerfully. It's the other place for me when I go.
Miss Clay, the thin-faced girl was doing icicle impressions. I realise that, through no fault of your own, you've been placed in a highly invidious position. Let me assure you, I will bring pressure to bear through every available channel to ensure that your stay in the environment in question will be as painless as possible. However,
it was probably just as well for her that she got no further, given the mood that Connie was in. As it was, the door opened, and Benny Shumway charged in. He was out of breath and holding a plastic carrier bag.
Connie, he barked, ignoring everyone else in the room. I've just been talking to young Hollinghead. Is it true? Connie nodded. If you mean about the contract. Yeah, right. He turned away and faced Cassie. Here, he said, reaching into the bag. Catch. He threw something, and much to her surprise, Cassie caught it. Thanks, she said, but I'm not hungry. Anyway, don't like apples. Apples? Connie said. Benny! The thin-faced girl had pushed back her chair and stood up. Miss Clay, she said, please give me that. Cassie looked at her, and then at Benny, who said, Just eat the fucking apple, Cassie. Trust me. What? Cassie said. Disobey a direct order from the boss. Yes. She smiled. No contest, she said, and bit. All the way home in the taxi, they hardly said a word, but when they reached Mortlake, they got out and walked up the street for a bit, until they reached a shop. Yesterday it had been a Dixon's. The day before that it had passed through a Robert Dyer Spheres, before morphing into a body shop. But before that, in the distant, unreal time before the weirdness came, it had been the same travel agency for 15 years, and, when Colin looked up at the words written on its window, that's what it was again. Colin smiled. Let's go in, he said. Fam hesitated, but not for very long. All right, she said. By the way, where the hell is Finatu, by the way? No idea, but I wanted to go there anyway. Oh, Fam looked at him, then down at the ground. Do we really have to? She said. I mean, I do love you, and everything's all right, and I know you want to get away from all this horrible stuff that's happened to you with your dad and those nasty people and the love potion and everything, but... No, Colin said firmly. I want us to go to Finatu. She was still looking at him, but now she was smiling. All right, she said. Colin put his hand on the shop door and pushed gently. And then, he said, I want us both to come back. It was nice of her, Benny said, putting his feet up on Connie's desk, to give us the company. Connie shrugged. It was the least she could do, she replied with her mouth full. And anyway, you heard what she said. Her lot don't have any more use for it. Typical bureaucratic mentality. It's less hassle to get rid of it than to figure out how to write it up in the accounts. Not, she added, that I'm complaining. It's just... Cassie looked at her. What? Oh, I don't know. Connie swallowed the last slice of her apple. It's just that all these years I've dreamed of being made a partner, right? But, this is silly, but I'd have liked it to have been because someone finally recognised how bloody good I am at my job. Not because a senior admin-grade angel wants to keep the auditors from giving her a hard time. Spoils it, she said. A bit, she added. Not a big bit, though. And there's eternal life on top of that, Benny pointed out, neatly spitting an apple pip into the waste paper basket. Which means... He stopped, froze, dived into the basket like a dog chasing a ball, and emerged holding the discarded pip carefully between forefinger and thumb. Anybody got a matchbox? Benny, what are you... He smiled. Not exactly your ordinary apple seed, remember? Oh! Connie took an envelope from her desk drawer and handed it to him. You were saying... Basically, Benny mumbled as he licked the envelope flap. You're never ever going to have to retire. True! Connie allowed her face to slide into a grin. And I can't wait to see how they take the news. That's going to be fun. Allow me to spoil it for you. Benny yawned. Kaz Soslovich will burst into tears, say how happy he is for you and how much you deserve it, and give you a big hug that'll probably crack 2 ribs. Dennis Tanner will be livid, which means his mum will love us all forever. As for Jack Wells... Benny frowned. Actually, that's harder to call. I wouldn't be surprised if he decided to retire. Connie shook her head violently. No way! Not in a million years! I'm not so sure about that, Benny said. Between us and the music, I did hear a suggestion that he'd been headhunted. Get out! Who by? That's a good bit, Benny said. Jackie Dow of all people.
Apparently the Bank of the Dead has plans to expand into the insurance and pensions sector. Logical,
Benny added.
when you think about it.
I guess so. But Jack Wells, I don't see it myself.
Well, I don't see him buying a bungalow by the sea and growing hollyhocks. Anyhow,
Benny went on.
we'll know soon enough. Oh, when I think of it, Cassie,
Yes,
thanks for letting us share the apple.
Benny said gravely. What? Oh, that's all right. She frowned. After all, you both went to a lot of trouble on my account. Besides, she added, I wasn't sure you'd even want to.
Are you kidding?
Benny grinned, dog-like.
Living forever and ever, still being around when the sun goes over. Wouldn't miss it for worlds. Oh, remind me someone. I've still got Colin's dad locked up in the lavatory on the second floor. Sooner or later, I suppose I'll have to go and let him out.
Cassie smiled. It'll be a bit fractious, I imagine.
I hope so, Benny said. And anyway, he'll calm down fast enough when I explain to him that he may have lost a son, but he's gained a permanent supernatural workforce, contractually bound to serve his company during the lifetime of an immortal. Exactly what he wanted, so that's all right. I mean to say, he's an arsehole, but if there's a serving of happy ending left over when all the good guys have had theirs, it'd be churlish to begrudge him any just because he's a nasty little shit. That's forgiveness, he added. Divine, apparently.
I wonder how they'll get on, Connie said. Young Colin and his girlfriend, I mean. She leaned forward and picked up the baseball bat that lay on her desk. It was still the same ill-advised mix of colours, but thanks to basic transfiguration spell, the JWW logo had been replaced by a gracefully intertwined SSC, Schwartz, Albrecht, Shumway, Clay & Co. She'd grown rather attached to it over the last 15 minutes. True love, she said, and sighed. I used to want that. When I was young. Mind you, I also want a dark purple nail varnish, a beehive hairdo, and a pony. Nice thing about getting old is growing out of things.
Don't knock true love,
Benny said seriously.
Thought I'd found it. 6 times, and, well, the first one dumped me after 6 months. The second one ate onions in bed. Number 3 was all very well until I met number 4. Number 4 was Countess Judy. And the 5th one got rust in the seals and had to be scrapped. Silly, really, which isn't to say, he added with a grin, that when a 7th one comes along...
True love, Cassie said suddenly, is a joke. It's no such thing, and I don't care what that pointy-faced bitch said. It's all just biochemistry anyhow. I mean, does it really matter if the chemicals are poured in your tea or brewed up inside you by your own glands? It's just chemicals making you do stupid things that you wouldn't dream of doing if it was up to you. Benny laughed.
Just wait, he said. I'll remind you of that one of these days.
Feel free, Cassie replied. It's not going to happen, for which I'm very grateful. After all, I've got a business to run now. We've got a business to run, Connie said. And if you two are thinking it'll be a piece of cake, you couldn't be more wrong. I mean, just think how much of our core client base we've lost over the last 18 months.
My God.
Benny shook his head.
She's only been a boss for 20 minutes, and already she's starting to sound like one. That's sad.
Maybe. Connie finished her coffee. But at least we're never going to wake up one morning and find we've been sold along with the client list and the office furniture. Eternal life, though, Cassie interrupted. Think about it for just a second. Eternal life. And you can do magic. Think of the possibilities. I've thought, Connie said straight away, if you're not careful, you'll end up like her... What's her name? We never did find out what her name was, did we? Anyway, just like her, playing God.
Jackie Dow's going to be really miffed when I tell him, Benny said. I have a feeling he's been looking forward to rather a lot to the day when I go down there and don't get to come back again. Not that he's malicious or anything, but he does love a properly balanced ledger.
Anyway, Connie said briskly, now that we're the management, I think we ought to crack down on long, time-wasting coffee breaks, and, since none of us has done much in the way of paying work these last few weeks... Slave driver, Cassie said as she stood up, if you're going to be like this for the rest of eternity, count on it. Cassie sighed. Maybe I'd have been better off in hell. Quite likely. Now, shoo, including you, Shumway, Connie added, with a ferocious scowl. I'll trouble you to bear in mind that you two just elected me senior partner, so when I tell you to do something... When they'd gone, Connie sat for a while, looking up at the corner of the room. In a day or so, she'd move all her stuff into Jack Wells's room. It was bigger. It had a breathtaking view of the city. Several cities, in fact, thanks to its inbuilt instantaneous relocation charm. And most of all, it was where the boss lived. It was, of course, invidious, petty, and very sad of her to care about stuff like that. But she did. Work. She'd just been lecturing the others about it. Maybe she ought to do a spot of it herself. For example, there were the last few loose ends of Cass Suslovich's planning application. She nodded decisively. Nothing like sorting out reserved matters on a castle in the air for bringing you back down to earth. She got up and found the file in the cabinet. When she turned round, she saw someone sitting in her chair. You again, she said. Yes. If you've come back to say you've changed your mind, you can forget about that because you signed a legal transfer and...
Certainly not, the thin-faced girl said. But there's one last item of unfinished business. With all the drama earlier, it slipped my mind.
Drama? Connie repeated. Fine. Actually, while you're here, you can clear up one thing for me. Was it your lot who kept trapping young Cassie in those stupid consequence mines and probability wells? The thin-faced girl frowned.
Excuse me?
A few weeks back, Connie said, before all this started, seemed like every 5 minutes I was getting called out to go and unstick her. Now, the way I see it, either it was you or someone else, and if it was someone else, it's reasonable to assume they're still out there. So...
Oh,
the thin-faced girl held up her hand.
A simple misunderstanding. Yes, that was my organisation. We needed to conduct a number of tests on Ms. Clay to ascertain whether she was, as we then believed, a reincarnation of the female star-crossed lover. We used a number of devices to immobilise her while we carried out the tests. Not the ones you mentioned, but close enough to be mistaken for them. We are, of course, sorry for any inconvenience we may have caused, but I can assure you that we had all the necessary clearances.
I bet, Connie said. Right, that's sorted that out. What was it you wanted to ask me about?
Not ask, the thin-faced girl smiled. Discuss. Really, it's just curiosity, she frowned. I suppose it's a side effect of having been a human for a while. It feels strange, actually, wanting to know something and not being able to.
I can imagine, Connie said warily. So?
About you,
the thin-faced girl said briskly.
For one thing, why did you never get married?
That's a very personal question, Connie snapped.
Is it? Oh.
The thin-faced girl shrugged.
Why is that? I mean, was it more personal than where you went on a holiday last year? Is it because of the sexual connotations?
Connie smiled at her. Yes.
I see. Well, even so, I'm interested. The truth is, in my line of work, I don't get to meet many humans. Not live ones, anyway. And while I've been down here, working on this project, I suppose I've realised how little I understand them. If you answer my question, it might give me valuable insights into the human mindset.
Connie thought about it. If I tell you, she said, will you go away?
If you want me to.
Fine. Connie composed her thoughts. Well, I had my chances over the years, plenty of them, but, she shrugged, getting married means settling down. Settling down means compromising, losing your focus. It probably sounds a bit sad, but for me the job, being a sorceress, always came first. Not because I'm a lean, hungry corporate dingo, but because it's always been fun. And having to divert a great big slice of my life and my energy to negotiating a relationship with some bloke, well, that's more like work than fun. It's just boring old trying to get along with people. You can't solve the problems with spells or charms. You've got to hammer them out the ordinary way. I guess you could say that in all relationships I tried. The magic just wasn't there. And magic's what I like best, you see.
I think so, the thin-faced girl said. I'm finding this both helpful. Thank you. Would you mind if we examined this in greater depth? After all, she went on, Unless I learn a bit more about people, the chances are that the next time I have to deal with them in the course of business, I'll repeat the mistakes I made here. Surely you wouldn't want that, for your fellow human's sake."
Connie sighed. "Put it like that," she said, "you may have a point."
"Excellent. As I understand it," she went on, "human social interaction is assisted by shared consumption of beverages. Tea," she added, and a tray materialized on the desk. Born china, teapot, milk jug, another jug for the extra hot water, sugar bowl, and a silver strainer in a little 3-legged pot. "And, in case you're worried," she added, seeing the look on Connie's face, "there's no need. I can see why you might be suspicious about drinking anything you haven't made yourself, in the light of recent events. But, since we'll both be drinking from the same teapot—"
"Actually," Connie said, "it's more usual to use the cups." "Joke," she added. "I'll be mother."
"Excuse me?"
"Forget about it," Connie said, pouring the tea and dropping in her usual 2 sugars. "So, what else do you want to know about?"
"Your relationship with Mr. Shumway," the thin-faced girl said. "My impression is that although there is no question of a romantic attachment, you share with him a bond of comradeship that is in many respects as powerful as love, or possibly more so."
Connie thought about that. "I suppose I do," she said, "which is odd, because outside of work we wouldn't get on at all. I mean, his attitude to women, for one thing. Actually, his attitude to a lot of things. Everything, in fact. What I'm trying to say is, if we both got old and retired in the usual way, we'd promise each other on our last day that we'd keep in touch, no matter what, and then we'd never see each other again. Ever. But here in this building, I don't suppose there's anybody in the world I'm closer to, because in spite of it all, we're basically on the same side. Does that make any sense?"
"Yes,"
the thin-faced girl said, putting down her cup.
"And of course, with a working relationship of that nature, anything in the way of romantic involvement would be ruinous."
"Of course."
"Particularly," the thin-faced girl added with a faint smile, "since under the prevailing circumstances you'll be working together for the rest of your eternal lives."
"It'd be so embarrassing." Connie suddenly froze. "Have you been drinking your tea?"
"Yes, look, empty cup." The thin-faced girl assured her. "Nothing to worry about."
"Oh," Connie said, as her eyes closed and she started to slide towards the floor. "That's all right, then."
"Connie!"
Benny's voice in the darkness behind her eyelids, far away.
"Connie, love, are you all right?"
"Oh," she thought, "so I was right after all. Honestly, though, if you can't trust an angel—" But she didn't, of course. A lifetime in the business had taught her that, apart from the few good people who work alongside you, nobody is to be trusted. Ever. Because sooner or later they'll let you down, sure as God made little green apples, and, when you come to think of it, hadn't that been the dirtiest trick of them all? Connie opened her eyes. "Fine," she said. "Well, don't just stand there like a very small pyramid. Help me up off the floor." Benny reached down one of his broad, sausage-fingered hands, and she hauled herself up. "Don't tell me," she said. "You got a call from What's-Her-Face. Meet her in my office pronto." Benny clicked his tongue.
"Oh,"
he said. "No, don't worry. It's all right." Connie dusted herself off and sat back in her chair. A few deep breaths, and she was fine. "All right. You," she said loudly. "Come on out." Sure enough, the thin-faced girl materialized in front of them. She looked different. A floaty, sparkly dress instead of the dull as newsnight charcoal grey suit, a shimmering golden doughnut hovering over her head, wings. Apart from that, she was exactly the same.
"Please try not to think of it as a punishment," she said. "More like justice. After all, you interfered in the workings of my department. In the event, no harm came of it."
"Harm!" Benny exploded. "You stupid bloody elf! She sorted out the mess you'd made."
"Nevertheless," the thin-faced girl went on, "such meddling must be discouraged at all costs, and an appropriate reaction was called for. Ms. Swartz-Alberish, you were very helpful just now. In fact, I understand you very well. Wouldn't you agree?"
filter,
Benny said quietly. Connie nodded. You may have been wondering, the thin-faced girl went on, why I saw fit to give this firm to the three of you. Quite simple. I want you and Mr. Shumway here to be working side by side every day, forever, in the light of what I'd assumed, which you so kindly confirmed for me.
Oh, quite. Connie smiled at her. Listen, dear, next time you're dancing on a pin, if you could somehow manage to slip so the pin goes right up your...
Not punishment, the thin-faced girl said serenely. Certainly not revenge. Simple justice. Well, now that I've cleared up the last loose end...
She hesitated, frowned, and yawned.
I should be getting back, after all. I have plenty of work to be getting on with. A career woman, you see. Just like you.
Just like me. I was hoping you'd say that. Connie leaned back a bit further in her chair. She never realised before just how very comfortable it was. But here's a bit of advice from a pathetic little mortal. When people tell you things, listen. The thin-faced girl arched her eyebrows.
Meaning?
I told you, Connie said pleasantly, that the JWW love filter doesn't work if you dilute it with a liquid containing more than a trace of unfermented sugar, which is why, she went on, I got into the habit 37 years ago of taking 2 sugars in my tea. Wonderful things, habits, she added. You do them without thinking. The thin-faced girl looked at her, and then at the sugar ball on the tray.
Oh,
she said. Oh, Connie repeated. I think that just about says it all. Pleasant dreams.
Pleasant.
The thin-faced girl yawned again. Her eyes widened to fried egg size, and then closed. Another first, Connie said. Never seen anybody fast asleep in mid-air before. She stood up. Dozy Cow assumed that just because she's an angel it wouldn't work on her. Serves her right. I think we'd better leave now before she wakes up. In a minute. Benny was grinning so wide that Connie was worried in case the top of his head fell off. Before we go, sod it, he added. There's never a stick of chalk when you need one. Top drawer of the desk. Thanks. With the chalk, Benny drew a pentagram directly underneath where the thin-faced girl was hovering. He muttered something long-winded and funny-sounding under his breath, then clicked his fingers. That ought to do it, he said. Conjuring demons was never really my line, but it's hardly rocket science, is it? He looked up at the thin-faced girl and shrugged. Well, he said, she was management, and she made us do those annoying assessments. I asked for that Oscar by name, by the way. Connie giggled. Do you think he's her type? Benny nodded. A match made in heaven, he said. Humour, he added. He extended his elbow in a gentlemanly fashion. Connie took it. Come on, he said. Let's get out of here and go make some money. Oh, I just love Tom Holt books. They always just end so brilliantly. But it's not going to end, because we know that there's going to be another book, and the next one is The Better Mousetrap, J.W. Wells & Co., Book 5. So what did you think? Did you enjoy it? Do you think I should carry on? I'm thinking I might, if you'd like me to. But I digress. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful couple of days. I will be back with The Better Mousetrap in a couple of days if you all want it. And, yeah, keep smiling, take it easy, look after yourselves, and thanks for listening, Petal. And please don't forget, hit that like button for me, click the notifications bell, share if you want to, subscribe if you like it. But I always love seeing you, and I always love hearing from you. Take it easy.